My name is Bruce, and the death of my marriage was not announced with a scream or a slammed door or the cold formal language of a lawyer's letter. It was whispered in a leather-bound journal, in my wife's elegant looping script, on a page that smelled of her jasmine perfume. The journal was an accident, a literal stumble. Our 4-year-old son, Finn, had a fever. In the midnight scramble for the pediatric thermometer, always kept in the top drawer of my wife Clara's writing desk, I knocked over a stack of her beautiful notebooks. They fanned across the floor like fallen leaves. One, a deep burgundy moleskine, fell open. The phrase caught my eye not because I was looking for it, but because it was written larger than the rest, underlined twice, as if to carve it into the page. He is the father my child deserves. The sentence hovered in the dim glow of the nightlight. It didn't compute. He, the only he in our domestic orbit besides me, was Arlo. Arlo, the male nanny we'd hired 6 months ago. The world narrowed to that line of ink. The squeak of the rocking chair where I'd been soothing Finn stopped. The hum of the house vanished. There was only the proof, in her hand, of my deepest, most unutterable fear. To understand the vertigo of that moment, you have to understand the before. Clara and I were partners in a specific kind of modern ambition. I ran a boutique financial consultancy, my life a mosaic of spreadsheets and strategic calm. Clara was a rising star in sustainable architecture, her mind a storm of creative, purposeful energy. Finn was our planned, precious nexus, our convergence. But convergence is a theoretical point. In reality, 2 high-velocity careers and a toddler create not a nexus, but a chaotic, exhausting event horizon. We were drowning in the mundane, the daycare drop-off debates that felt like UN negotiations, the forgotten grocery items, the sleepless nights that eroded our patience, our humor, our very recognition of each other. We needed help, not a mother's helper, not a traditional nanny. We needed a third adult, a professional. Clara found Arlo through an elite agency that specialized in developmental childcare. He was a former Montessori teacher, studying child psychology part-time, in his mid-30s. Calm with a quiet, grounded presence. He had capable hands and a laugh that was more of a warm rumble. "He's not just a babysitter," Clara said, her eyes alight with relief. "He's a co-parenting partner. He'll provide a balanced masculine energy for Finn." I agreed. It made perfect, logical sense. Arlo started, and from day one, he was perfect.
I was grateful. At first, his presence lowered the temperature in our home. Clara seemed less harried, Finn adored him. But a subtle shift began, a recentering. I'd come home from work, my mind still humming with market volatility, to a scene of domestic serenity. Clara and Arlo would be at the kitchen island, a glass of wine poured for her, a craft beer for him, discussing Finn's day with the focused intensity of co-CEOs reviewing a vital project. I'd feel like a visitor, an investor dropping in for a quarterly report. "Arlo noticed Finn responds better to positive reinforcement than timeouts," Clara would tell me, as if delivering a crucial briefing. "Arlo thinks we should limit screen time to educational apps that promote spatial reasoning. Arlo says the way I say no creates unnecessary power struggles." Arlo says. The phrase became the preface to all new household doctrine. My suggestions, to let Finn just watch a silly cartoon, to have pizza for dinner, to have a good old-fashioned tickle fight, began to feel like quaint, slightly irresponsible heresies. My role was narrowing. I was the provider, the fun uncle who showed up on weekends with gifts. Arlo was the day-to-day architect of our son's character. And Clara? Clara was his appreciative client, marveling at the quality of the work. The journal entry was the blueprint I was never meant to see. The father my child deserves. It wasn't just an observation. It was a verdict, a comparison. And in that comparison, I was found permanently lacking. I closed the journal. I placed it back in the drawer. I found the thermometer. I tended to Finn, my hands moving on autopilot, my mind a silent, screaming vault. I did not confront. Not then. A confrontation would be emotional, messy. It would be met with defensiveness, with accusations of violating her privacy. It would allow her to reframe my discovery as the crime. I needed to move from the emotional to the evidential. I needed to understand the scope of the blueprint. So, I began to observe, not as a hurt husband, but as an analyst studying a hostile merger. I noticed the new routines. Saturday mornings, once my time with Finn for pancakes and park trips, were now nature immersion hikes led by Arlo. Clara always joined. "It's important for his environmental connection," she'd say, pulling on hiking boots that matched Arlo's. I'd be left in the quiet house, paying the bills that funded the high-performance outdoor gear they wore. I noticed the language. Finn, at 4, began using phrases that were not his. "I need to regulate my emotions," he'd say during a tantrum. Or, "Papa, that is not a sustainable choice," regarding a plastic toy. The echo of Arlo's calm, pedagogical voice in my son's high pitch was a physical blow. I noticed the looks. Not passionate, illicit glances, but something more devastating. A shared, profound understanding between Clara and Arlo. A nod over Finn's head as he mastered a puzzle. A silent communication that completely excluded me. They were a united front of enlightened parenting. I was the bureaucratic holdover from an outdated, inefficient model.
I hired a discreet investigator, not to follow them to a motel, but to trace the architecture of their alliance. I needed to know if it was just professional admiration or something that had crossed a line. The investigator's report was a masterpiece of mundane damning. No evidence of physical infidelity, but their digital footprint was a shared world. They were in constant communication. Articles on child development, links to parenting podcasts, photos of Finn with detailed captions analyzing his progress. They had a shared digital calendar for Finn's activities that I was not on. They had inside jokes about difficult clients. Me, I realized, was sometimes the client. And then the financial pattern. Clara had, without discussion, given Arlo a corporate credit card for child-related expenses. The receipts showed not just museum tickets and organic groceries, but dinners for 2 at farm-to-table restaurants while I worked late, and a weekend trip to a family wellness retreat where the booking was for 2 adults and 1 child. They were living a family life, a better, more intentional, more deserving family life, and I was funding it. The investigator also provided Arlo's background. Not a sinister past, but a revealing one. His own father had been a distant corporate lawyer. He'd spoken in therapy sessions, accessed through a regrettable but necessary channel, about his mission to break the cycle of emotional absence and provide the attuned paternal presence he never had. He wasn't having an affair with my wife. He was on a moral crusade to replace me. My revenge, therefore, could not be about infidelity. It had to be about appropriation. He hadn't stolen my wife's body, he had stolen my role, my voice, my legacy in my own son's eyes, and he had done it with my wife's full complicity, paid for with my money. The plan formed with cold clarity. I would not fight for my wife. The marriage was a shell. I would fight for my son. And I would do it by using their own weapons: superior strategy, psychological insight, and absolute control of the narrative. I began by becoming, abruptly, the model student. I embraced Arlo's way with an enthusiasm that disarmed them. I asked for reading lists. I practiced emotion coaching. I used the jargon. I saw the flicker of surprise in Clara's eyes, then satisfaction. He's finally getting it, she must have thought. This granted me access. I was included in the group chats, the calendar. I became a part of their parenting collective. And in doing so, I gained something crucial: trust and evidence. I then engineered a professional crisis. I told Clara the consultancy was facing a major, time-consuming lawsuit. I'd need to be virtually absent for a critical 6-week period, working late, traveling. It's a nightmare, but it will secure our future, I said, pouring on the weary provider act. She bought it, her concern tinged with relief. The field was now clear for her and Arlo. During those 6 weeks, I was not at the office. I was in a short-term rental 2 blocks away, watching and working. With my full time now dedicated to the project, I executed my plan. I canceled the corporate card I'd given Clara, citing the legal need to isolate assets. I opened a new individual account for household expenses and funded it with a modest, fixed allowance. The lavish 2-person dinners on the Nanny's card stopped. The wellness retreats vanished from the calendar. The economic engine of their alternative family sputtered. Using the contact I had from the investigator, I discovered Arlo's ultimate goal: to open his own progressive childhood learning center. He'd been quietly scouting locations, using his salary, my salary, to fund a business plan. I anonymously sent a detailed, professional critique of his business plan to the 2 investors he was courting, highlighting the legal and ethical risks of a model so dependent on deep, quasi-parental entanglement with clients. The investors got cold feet. His dream, financed by my disillusionment, evaporated. This was the core. While they thought I was buried in legal briefs, I was doing something radical. I was learning to be Finn's father. Not Arlo's version, my version. I hired my own child development coach, a no-nonsense woman who believed in resilience, imagination, and plain old fun. I spent my days researching, not market trends, but how to build the world's best blanket fort. I practiced magic tricks. I learned to identify every construction vehicle by sound. I wasn't trying to compete with Arlo's serene Montessori tower. I was building a messy, joyful, chaotic pirate ship right next to it. And then the coup de grace. I used my access to the shared calendar to schedule a mandatory family meeting for a Sunday afternoon. When Clara and Arlo sat down, expecting to discuss Finn's preschool transition, I played a recording. It was a compilation of audio clips I'd gathered from the home security system, legal in our state for non-bedroom areas. Snippets of their conversations. Clara's voice, wistful. "You have a gift, Arlo. It's like you speak his language." Arlo's voice, confident. "It's about presence, Clara. Full, intentional presence." The sound of Finn's laughter, followed by Arlo's warm rumble and Clara's sigh of contentment. It was a soundscape of my replacement.
They sat in stunned silence.
"Julian, what is this?"
Clara whispered, horrified. "This is the soundtrack to the last 6 months," I said, my voice calm. "This is you building a new family unit, with me as the distant patron. You," I turned to Arlo, "are fired, effective immediately. Your final check is on the table. If you contact my wife or son again, I will send the business plan critique and these recordings to the licensing board for the nanny agency and to every family in your network. Your career in developmental childcare will be over." Arlo stood, pale, his calm facade shattered. He looked at Clara, but she was staring at me, her journal's secret now a roaring public broadcast. When he was gone, I turned to her. "The journal, Clara. The father my child deserves." I read it. She flinched as if struck. "You wanted a better father? You hired one. You curated one. But you forgot one thing. I am his father. And from now on, you are going to see what that really means. We are getting a divorce, and I'm going to sue for, and I will get, primary custody." She laughed, a hollow, desperate sound. "On what grounds? You're never here." "On the grounds of parental alienation," I said, sliding a folder across the table. It contained the financial records, the calendar evidence, the testimony from the investigator about their exclusive, excluding partnership.
on the grounds that you systematically partnered with a paid employee to deliberately undermine my relationship with my son, creating a psychological parent scenario with him. A family court judge will see this for exactly what it is, a calculated, funded campaign to replace the biological father, and they do not like it. The fight was brutal, but short. My evidence was cold, factual, and devastating. Her journal entry was the emotional centerpiece. In her own words, she had expressed a desire to replace me. The court granted me primary physical custody. Clara got generous visitation, but the framework of Finn's life, the routines, the school, the ethos, was now mine to shape, not Arlo's.
Today, Finn is 6. Our apartment is littered with Lego catastrophes and drawings of dragons. We eat pizza on Fridays. We have tickle fights that end in breathless giggles. We talk about feelings, sure, but we also talk about nonsense, about superheroes, about why the sky is blue in simpler terms. I am not a perfect father. I am a present one, a true one. Clara sees him every other weekend. She tries to implement the old routines, but they feel like borrowed scripts now. Fenn comes home talking about Mama's house, then launches into a story about the rocket we built from cardboard boxes. Arlo's learning center? Never opened. He teaches at a standard preschool now, I'm told. Sometimes, in the quiet after Fenn is asleep, I think about that journal entry. The father my child deserves. It was the cruelest thing she ever wrote, but in a terrible way, it was also a gift. It was the diagnosis for a disease I hadn't even known was killing me. It allowed me to see the tumor, the slow, genteel replacement of my own fatherhood, so I could cut it out. They didn't need a scandalous affair. They just needed to make me obsolete. But you cannot make a man obsolete in his own son's heart. Not if he's willing to fight for that heart with everything he has. Not with spreadsheets and strategy, but with time, with patience, and with a love that is messy, imperfect, and irrevocably his own. The male nanny taught my son about geodesic domes, but I am teaching him about foundations. And mine, finally, is built on the only truth that matters. I chose to stay, and I chose to fight. I am not the father someone else thinks he deserves. I am the father he has. And that, it turns out, is more than enough.